Let's talk about this, which just crossed the wires just a few minutes before the show started, and that is President Biden trying to address, he's going to be speaking at 2 o'clock this afternoon on the economy and on inflation, on oil, but they wanted to get this announcement out before he speaks today at 2 o'clock, which is the United States is now releasing 50 million barrels of oil from the United States strategic stockpile of oil reserves. Now, to be clear, why do we have these oil reserves? It's, ideas like, well, in case of a war, or it's not really in case of this situation, but it is in case of, say, the Middle East decides to stop producing oil for the United States. We get into some sort of economic war. We need to have our own strategic stockpile. But 50 million barrels is the most that we have ever released from the oil reserves. We can go back to the Gulf War. We released some under George H.W. Bush. George W. Bush, during Hurricane Katrina, released, I think, like 11 million. Barack Obama, I think, 15 million. And this is the most we've ever released, 50 million barrels to try to ease up some of these oil and gas prices.
Now, the United States saying that this is a loan, so we will use it up for now. Again, this is about the fact that there are supply issues coming out of Asia, and there are concerns that lockdowns will once again tamper demand for oil. And so we want to make sure that we're ready for these disruptions. But it is a loan. It is supposed to go back into our stores. We'll use it up for now. Boy, it would have been nice if we had been a leader in reusable energy, but we're not.
So. Right. And, this comes at a time when we've been also browbeating other, saying we need to, stop our dependence on foreign oil. And I get it can't happen overnight, right? I get that this isn't something you can just happen overnight. But it is interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's crazy that they throw us this narrative that the pipeline was hacked and the gas prices went up, and it was because of all that. When they had these reserves and it never had to get to these prices in the first place, it's like, oh, you know what? Now that it's hitting $6 a gallon, I guess we'll pull out the reserves that we've had all along, and we'll get the prices back down for the holidays, but not during a pandemic.
Right. Like we have the opportunity at all of these different times to release this oil. I mean, that's a great point, right? So We're concerned about price gouging. We're concerned about these gas stations running up the price. We saw $15 gasoline in parts of Washington, D.C. during that pipeline hack.
Yeah. Yes, but there was actually disruption. David makes a good point during the pipeline over the summer.
Right. So there was disruption.
We don't have that now.
There is no disruption. There is no disruption right now. So what's different from like Hurricane Katrina, what's different than a Gulf War when all these oil refineries are on fire because Saddam Hussein sets them on fire, is that there is no disruption. OPEC, the oil producing countries, OPEC Plus, is simply not producing the oil. So they're holding back. So it's a whole like shell game, in my opinion, about what's happening. So you have OPEC and Russia basically sitting back with their arms crossed, the Middle East just saying, we're not going to produce the oil that you want, so your prices are going up. Great. So then President Biden releases the strategic oil reserves, 50 million barrels of it, and this will, for a time, and it'll take a while for these prices to come back down at the pump. There's not a direct relationship between this supply and prices at the pump. So just because President Biden flicks the switch, you're not going to see an immediate decrease. But what if OPEC just says, oh, wait a second, you're releasing 50 million barrels? Great. We will continue. We will actually lower our production even further now.
Or send it to other nations.
Japan coming out this morning saying they are also going to release strategic oil reserves because of what OPEC is doing. We send, just give you a frame of reference, how much money we send to Saudi Arabia and prop up these countries, how much money, billions of dollars that we send to the Middle East and prop up these countries. And now they're just sitting back and folding their arms and telling us that they're not going to release a certain amount of oil to us. And we continue to fund them.
We fund our own oil industry here in the United States. We're funding, subsidizing these oil companies.
Right. Yeah, we pay them, BP. I mean, how many of these companies we spend billions of dollars propping up in the United States, and here most Americans are being hit hard with these gas prices. I'm just curious in the chat, let me know the gas prices where you are, what you've seen. But, President Biden is flying out today to Nantucket after this speech. Price on the island, I looked this morning, is $4.41 in Nantucket. where he's going to be spending Thanksgiving. $4.41 a barrel. And there's stickers popping up now on these pumps that are saying, like, picture of Biden with an arrow pointing, saying this is his fault. And let's be honest, it's not. And no president really has any, what's what I'm looking for?
Sway.
Yeah, I mean, these, when they're up,
influence.
it's not his. It's all OPEC. It has nothing to do with Biden. Yet this is going to be seized on, obviously, as an opportunity for Republicans to say, see, we should be drilling more. We should be opening up more drilling reserves. We shouldn't be pulling back.
And
How
meanwhile,
arbitrary are these prices? Sorry.
you go ahead, please.
I was going to say, how arbitrary are these prices anywhere? Like, where are we getting the information on how the prices fluctuate and what we're paying here and what we're paying there? How much we're subsidizing? Like, if we subsidize the oil industry, are they taking the prices down to compensate for that? Like, we don't know any of that.
Yes. I don't think that we should really ever assume the law of supply and demand is in the works with anything in our consumer economy anymore.
Yeah.
Period. Like, it just, everything is perverted through government intervention.
Yeah.
And now economists are saying that, hey, it's only these few sectors that are experiencing inflation that will probably continue into the next couple of months. For instance, oil and gas, which will affect your heating and your energy. But other products we think are pretty isolated from this. You're fine. You can continue to go shopping. The last time the president came out to speak, he said, hey, I've spoken to the unions. I've decided that we're going to work longer hours. We're going to open up these shipping ports. Things are going to start flowing. And that seems to happen. But then you also see the media saying, thank you, President Biden. That all worked. And now our targets are filled, and the dollar section is full of all kinds of like dollar Christmas stuff. Like, it's fine now, right? And then we have these economists saying, you're fine. It's only these number of things that are being affected. We spoke at length yesterday about meat. You're okay, right? The numbers do seem to bear out that it is just these specific things. But what they're really worried about is our precious recovery, right? We must recover from the pandemic. We must prove that the economy is recovered. The economy never really suffered because we continued these government intervention programs. Wall Street did fine. It's like, hey, Wall Street's doing fine. You're doing fine.
Well, I mean, it's interesting this morning. Obviously, we had Jerome Powell yesterday renominated to a second term as the Fed chair. Under President Biden. And across the board, I almost ran the montage here that I was going to pull together this morning. I just didn't have time with a sick baby. But it was in economist after economist after economist saying this was a don't rock the boat moment. This is good for Wall Street. This is consistency by having Fed Chief Jerome Powell in place here. This is good for the markets. This is good for America.
Nothing fundamentally changing.
Don't worry about a thing. Yeah, this is nothing fundamentally changing. And look, they'll continue to take care. The markets love it. There was one economist who's like, yeah, the markets love this. This is good. And then you have a number of economists saying, hey, this idea of inflation, ignore all of this inflation hysteria. You know, if you're watching this right now and you're like, I'm paying a lot more for a lot of things right now, well, then you're just hysterical in the minds of like the business press. Like, you're just hysterical. Ignore the hysterical people out there who are seeing that these prices are affecting them. Don't worry about it. And you have all these economists and members of the media that are, and Wall Street folks that are just saying, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Don't even worry about it. You're fine.
So they keep telling us,
Keynesian.
no, it's okay. We're handling it, right? As if, and it does feel very much like a press move. Like, hey, the president spoke to the unions last time. He handled it. It's all good now. We can get our stuff from China. Now the president's releasing oil. It's all good now. Right. We're okay. And you don't feel the effects of inflation. You don't.
Yeah, don't. Just ignore this. You are fine. You are fine. Nothing to see here. You're all fine. Everyone in the chat right now, everyone who's watching the show, just don't, like, when you see that you're paying twice as much for your food, you're fine.
Shut up and eat it.
Just shut up.
But again, this affects how many people in our chat who are on fixed income who are going to see this price increase or this sort of raise, if you will, in their Social Security payments starting in just a number of weeks in January. That's all wiped out with the cost of living inflation. And so, I see a lot of journalists on Twitter saying, shut up to you inflation people, like stop yelling inflation. Everybody's fine. It's fine.
Who are these
But
idiots?
that's fine for those of us who still are earning, right? Who have earning power. But again, anyone who's living on fixed income or disability, they're not quite as fine. It is not, it's just, this is something I struggle with every day is like, I should not speak for other people. I only want to come here and speak about the news from what I know and feel and read and analyze, but none of us should speak for each other.
Right. Yeah. No one understands. No one knows another person's financial situation. Right. I don't know what you spend for a cup of milk. I don't know how like that new gallon of milk that's at the store is going to affect you and your family.
Yeah. Look, I'm a CEO of a family too, right? I have to make decisions every day based on what I think is good for my family and what we can afford and what I think that, is right for us. But I don't think any of us should say like, well, the average American can afford this. This is a big pet peeve of mine is when someone says he can afford it or she can afford it. Because I'm always like, how do you know? I think that's the epitome of rude. None of us should say how this affects anybody else, even someone who's a high earner. It's like, you don't know. Does that person care for a sick child? Does that person have an aging parent? Does that person have medical bills because they got hit by a car without insurance? You don't know. You never know. So we're not speaking for anybody, but we are saying that it doesn't feel like, like poof, look the other way, the government's got it. That doesn't feel like the right way to be either.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask a question? I don't know if you know the answer to this, but like how, if oil prices are all the same, and it's like federally what they pay, how can you pay $6 in California, $3 in Washington, $2 in West Virginia? Like, what determines? Like, is that because of the taxes and like it's you get that for so much a barrel, but then it's the taxes in California that take it to $6? Like, how does that work? Do you know?
Yeah, a lot of that, and so I can only speak to what I know from the East Coast, and the reason that a lot of people used to in Pennsylvania and Delaware would go across the state border into New Jersey is because gas prices were so much cheaper in New Jersey. And a lot of that had to do with the taxes, and it also had to do with state regulations. So people would literally, they would calculate, depending on gas prices, crossing like the Ben Franklin Bridge or the Betsy Ross Bridge in Philadelphia, and calculate how much the toll would cost to go across, and if it would make sense to go across and then come back to buy the gas in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Because it would be significantly cheaper. And there's, obviously distribution for different ports, obviously less expensive at certain ports. And then if you're in certain parts of the country, obviously that's why Hawaii, to get the oil and gas to those particular spots is obviously way more expensive. So it has to do with all of that state taxes.
Is there also a profit margin percentage that a gas station can actually add to it after that? Because sometimes like right across the street, you'll pay 2 cents more than you will.
Yeah, and they factor that in, of course, but then they have to deal with the price gouging laws, so they can't. They have some leeway, and that's why you have, what is it, GasBuddy.com? If you've never heard of the website GasBuddy.com, if you go there, you can see where the gas prices are in your neck of the woods and what those look like across town. Let me see, GasBuddy.com.
I think there's an app too for that.
Yeah, there is an app here. Let me see here. Here it is. Oh,
meanwhile, you may have seen the story in the newsletter this morning about how in the UK now all new construction has to have electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah.
Because the UK is still moving forward with their plan to only sell electric vehicles starting in 2030. So obviously you need chargers for those things. And now all new, which is awesome, right? Because people don't keep gas stations in their homes. Now, essentially, you will have something like, why are you?
This is how, I can't stand these CAPTCHA things. I literally want to leave the internet. It asked me 12 times, can you pick an image of a boat? I'm trying to show people this website, GasBuddy.com, and it's like, I can't even get on the website because it wants me to pick boats. Okay, I've already picked the boat. Here's a boat. There's a boat. Next. Now it's going to ask me,
it gives you
here's
more
boats. Here's another boat. Here's another boat. And then like if you and the my favorite are the ones where it's like really hard. There's like a half of a
Where it's like,
traffic
where's
light.
the crosswalk? And there's a tiny
Yeah.
little stripe in one. You're like, I don't know. What is Gas Buddy? I've never.
Gas Buddy. We used to interview the guy on Gas Buddy on our show, but it would show you like where you could earn free gas back and all this other stuff. But it tracks in your neighborhood basically where you can pay the cheapest amount for gas based on your or if you're taking a trip, and you can do all of that. So you can use Gas Buddy to find out where any of that stuff is in your town.
Okay, look, we are at an inflection point where it is getting harder and harder to live our lives on non-sustainable fossil fuel. And I feel like the government doesn't want us to feel any pain when it comes to this inflection point, but there's pain. We're all feeling this pain. And, you know, this is inevitable. It's not going to get less painful. Nobody's going to, like, be able to, yeah.